Nigerian startup wins Mobility and Smart Cities Innovator Award at GITEX. Federal government takes measures to sustain growth patterns recorded in recent growth indices, says Finance Minister to global community. UK Finance Minister Kwasi Kwarteng reportedly out after market chaos and tax-cutting plans. Plus, oil stable as OPEC Plus quotas offset low Chinese demand. This is Business Express on the network service of the NTA, and we are reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us at this time, and it is that time we talk business. And we'll start by telling you that Nigeria is not oblivious of how global economic trajectory is affecting her. However, steps are being taken to sustain already growth patterns recorded in recent growth indices. That was the position of the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning as she joined other policymakers in the global debate on the economy. Let's join Leah Katumbabatunde for details.
Financial markets have reacted to the news that Nigeria is looking to restructure her debt as the cost of servicing it rise. The fundamentals are tightly roped as investors as well as creditors try to feel the pulse. Minister Zainab Ahmed speaks on what is at stake for Nigeria and the way out.
We've been able to shift our loans from short tenors to medium and longer term tenors. We have to do the same thing for international borrowings as well, bilateral loans and even some of the concessional loans, that the periods should be stretched to give us more fiscal room. While we are working to increase revenue, to improve on our revenue to debt service, we still need to be able to renegotiate and stretch out our repayment obligations to provide.
So when you see dark clouds on the debt horizon, don't wait. Look at ways in which you can extend maturities. You can improve the matching of currency obligations with what you are earning yourself. In that sense, what Nigeria is doing in the current environment is exactly what Nigeria should be doing.
Right. Nigeria is not the only country in dire straits. The global economy is being weighed down by way too much baggage.
There needs to be coordination there amongst the authorities. There needs to be thought about microprudential instruments, I just said a lot, that could potentially be adjusted for macroprudential reasons such as the leverage ratio on banks to help ease this transition that's necessary from a monetary perspective.
The debate was on the back of heightened inflation to levels not seen in decades, high debt levels and increasing strains from tighter global financial conditions amid a global fragmentation pressure. From Washington, D.C., I'm Leah Katungbaba-Tunde.
Still on conversations on the global economy, the International Monetary Fund IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva says economies experiencing multiple shocks require stable hands by policymakers, urging them to act with sense of urgency to bring inflation down, minimize policy missteps, and act now to put in place responsible fiscal policy as well as prioritize protecting the vulnerable. The IMF boss said this at a press briefing on the sidelines of the IMF World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C.
With fiscal buffers exhausted because of the pandemic, levels of debt very high. And so the obvious conclusion is that policy measures need to be well targeted and they need to be temporary. Steer away from across the board fiscal support that is neither effective nor affordable. If we are to help people and fight inflation, we must ensure that fiscal and monetary policy go hand in hand.
Now from Washington to Dubai, where SharpSharp, a Nigerian tech logistics startup that provides the best on-demand delivery service for online ordering and a same-day delivery of food, groceries, medicines, and packages with its mobile application, has won the award for mobility and smart cities innovation in the final of the Supernova Challenge pitch competition at the Gulf Information Technology Exhibition, GITEC 2022. ICT correspondent Chidinma Ndubisi reports that SharpSharp locked it out with Datans of India to win in this category, receiving $8,000 cash prize. But Melanin Capital of Kenya beat Flowis of Nigeria for Africa First category. Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Professor Isa Ali Pantami, is delighted that out of 800 entries, 9 Nigerian startups got to semi-finals, leading to 2 finalists before SharpSharp won the Smart City and Mobility category of the awards. Meanwhile, Nigeria has signed a memorandum of understanding with Microsoft Nigeria that will see 5 million citizens gain digital skills, and where best to seal the deal than at the largest tech exhibition in the world, GITEX Global Dubai, United Arab Emirates.
Let us ensure that we kickstart the training immediately, and most importantly in this month of October. This is indeed very important, and I encourage our citizens in Nigeria to utilize these opportunities and learn from the training.
The Ministry of Mines and Steel Development is to collaborate with the Central Bank of Nigeria in providing soft loans to young Nigerians in jewelry design. Minister of State for Mines and Steel Development, Gbemisola Saraki, stated this at the graduation of the second batch in master training in jewelry making and design in Abuja. The training under the World Bank sponsored Mind Diver program is aimed at getting value for Nigeria's solid mineral products instead of exporting such raw materials.
The market first starts with local market. Could we start and perfect local market, which is what we did with our fashion, with our clothes. We perfect local market, and when we do that, the international market will come looking for us. The most important thing is to get Nigerians like myself to continue to buy jewelry from you. The ministry, through the MINDIVER project, has concluded plans to purchase starter packs for each of the graduates of batch 1 and batch 2. And then it comes to the issue of funding. I know that we are looking for, you need to funding towards soft loans, as somebody said. That what we will do as well with the ministry, I can assure you that as I stand here today, that the ministry will look at assisting and speaking with through because you know the central bank has different projects and different programs and funding to see how we as a ministry, we assure you, will work together to see how some of their various programs and possibility of funding can be extended to you. I think it would be good for us, Mr. Jeka and MINDIVER, to see how we can put that together, that whatever soft loans that you require to go further in the training can be acquired.
Well, let's now turn our attention to the national budget. And joining me to discuss the 2023 proposed budget is Aliu Ileas, economic analyst, You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, budget. It is budget of fiscal consolidation transition. What do you make of it?
Well, if you look at the name, the budget carry itself simply means is complementing what the current president has been doing and also preparing for another president to take over. But if you look at the budget generally, it's budget of 20.51 trillion, which is 20% ahead of last year budget. Quite interesting, though we are not doing compared to our peer in terms of the level of the budget. That could be challenge of revenue. However, if you look at that budget, it has the capital budget and also it has the recurrent budget. So looking at the capital budget, we want to say that let's first and foremost look at the budget in Nigeria itself. We can say thank you to this current administration because we've been able to sustain our budget from January to February. I mean, January to December. The
calendar,
yes, has been maintained.
Stable.
Exactly.
It's stable.
Very, very interesting. So it's allow implementation to take proper place. But if you look at the recurrent expenditure, it's quite huge. Because if you look at the current expenditure, we have 8 trillion. And also, we cannot say it is the only recurrent expenditure because we are also expending 6.31 trillion on debt services. So if you add the two together, it gives us 14 trillion recurrent expenditure, which is quite alarming and is not good for the country. However, if you look at the capital budget is 5.31. If you look at the capital budget, it's quite small compared to our numbers. Because if you look at the advantage in capital budget is that it benefits the whole Nigeria, while the recurrent expenditure only benefits few people. So moving forward, I will like to engage or advise the National Assembly to look into it. It's not necessary that they increase the budget itself, but they can adjust and tweak the budget whereby we'll have more for capital budget while they will reduce the recurrent expenditure. And by reducing the recurrent expenditure, a lot of things can be tweaked on. If you look at the overhead cost, it's quite high. Some organizations are doing about 1 billion overhead cost, while some are doing 900 million. So if you look at all these things, it is what we can really look at as well. And some also beyond the overhead cost, some also have some what we call is contingency cost. So when we have overhead, which one is contingency as well? So this has to be married together to have a better budget. Overall, decision on this budget is that we have been maintaining January to December calendar, which is quite interesting.
Okay, fine. Talking about the positives of the budget,
right.
Let's talk about from last year's budget. We have a calendar that is being sustained from January to December, which is good. Let's talk about the implementation. How would you assess how we've gone with the 2022 budget?
Well, if you ask me, we have challenge of implementation in 2022 budget simply because we expected some revenue that did not come. For instance, in the last year budget, we expect 9 trillion from oil and gas sector. But I can tell you from January to April, we expect 3 trillion, 3.2 trillion, but we could only do 1.2 trillion. That's about only 3.9%. That is a serious shortfall, and it affects the budget implementation itself because the more you get the revenue, the more you are able to. So, and this can be alluded to the challenge of oil and gas theft that we experience and vandalism. So, and that is what Nigeria need to look at, because if you look at this budget itself, if you look at it, it's 75%. If you look at the debt relief itself, is ahead about 75% increase compared to the 2022 budget. That's quite a challenge. And if you also look at the revenue that we're expecting this year, it's quite 2023 is quite low compared to what we see. It's about 2% low compared to this current year budget. So if you look at that, we have challenge of revenue, which has shown. So if you ask me, this year budget is even quite much more better compared to the upcoming budget. This which can be relates to what the challenge of revenue.
Well, the challenge of revenue is there. It's getting worse, it's getting better. It depends on the time. And personally, I was in the creeks of the Niger Delta where I witnessed firsthand the level of vandalism, the level of oil theft, which is huge. A particular oil producing company, I don't want to mention the name there, has a capacity of producing 2 million barrels per day. But if I tell you the level of production, it's devastating.
Right.
But that aside, tax has been another alternative to bring in revenues. How have we been doing? Have we been doing well?
But taking it,
what should we do in expanding the tax net? There's been this argument: the digital framework, the digital space should be taxed. Then we're talking about taxing luxurious lifestyles. Don't you think that will bring in more money?
Now, if you look
from
at
the economic point
yes,
of view,
if you look at Nigeria itself, our mainstay of the economy is oil and gas. But in terms of other government enterprises, we have been able, if you even look at this budget, the expectation from oil and gas is 1.9, while we are looking at other government-owned enterprises about 2.24 trillion, which is more. Which is very, very, very good. We are at least diverting gradually, at least diversifying gradually to get more revenue. But if you look at the tax itself, there is no need to even increase tax, but there is need to bring more people into the tax net. That's the major challenge. More people are there that are supposed to be in the tax net that are not in the tax net. So we need to do more by, let's say the FRS is doing fine, but they need to just do more, bring more mechanism to bring people into the tax.
What about the subnationals? We keep talking about, when we talk about budget, we keep talking about the national budget. When we talk of getting revenue in, we talk about the central revenue body. What about the subnationals? Well, the subnationals, I think more needs to be done at that level. Economically speaking, lead us to where the subnationals should go, because right now the predicament at the subnationals is that the government at the subnationals get to borrow money to pay salaries. They also get to borrow money to service debt.
Right.
So I think there must be such light on the subnationals.
That is the challenge. No, for the federal system that we have the federal, the states, and the local government. These three entities are supposed to come together to bring more advancement to Nigeria economy. However, for the local governments, if you look at tax that are supposed to come from local government to the federal government, are being blocked sort of to the benefit of the state. That's why government need to have hands every corner of the country so as they can bring this. However, if you look at subnational, ideally, subnational are supposed to get more internal revenue and even remit to the federal government. But because of the normal economic system that we run, federal system whereby federal government are to give money to the state and local government, some of them became so relaxed that they don't want to. So if you look at most states that are doing more to get internal revenue, they are doing fine, they are moving beyond expectations. So government needs to also say there must be clear blueprint on how states should generate its revenue, trickle down to the local government, and the responsibility of the federal government. For tax, most states want to get the tax themselves so that it will become their own benefit, why it's supposed to come to the federal government. Perhaps most business people also complain about double taxation. So if we have to look at it very well, states should do more in terms of remitting and collecting this tax even to the federal government purse.
Earlier on, you were talking about the capital aspect of this year's budget. Capital expenditure, 5.35 trillion, including capital component of the statutory transfers. What do you make of it?
Now, if you look at the capital expenditure, you discover that it's even lower compared to last year, which is not good enough. Also, capital expenditure benefits majority of Nigeria. They do social infrastructure, road, education, provide electricity. These are where Nigerians will benefit from. But if you look at the recurrent expenditure, it's only serve few people, the public officers, the civil servants, and perhaps service debts at a huge rate. So that's why every time I think we should find a way in Nigeria whereby our capital budget will always be above the recurrent expenditure. Because if you look at it very, very well, that means there will be low development, and perhaps if you do more in capital expenditure, it will also in turn bring more money for government. You know why? Manufacturing company will be able to apply the road, they will be able to access feeder road and other things. So these are the challenges that we need to. So we need to do more on capital expenditure and reduce drastically our recurrent expenditure. More so, if you look at our borrowings, it's another problem that we need to look into. Very soon, we will have our revenue less than amount we are using to service the debt. That's a serious problem. So because we are doing 93% now, very soon we will have to have more money, we get more money to service debt than our revenue, which is a serious challenge for the economy.
Okay, Mr. Elias, let me ask, have you been listening to conversations at the ongoing IMF and World Bank? Right. Okay, if you've been listening to, what are the economic fundamentals that is driving the global economy now that you think Nigeria should look to, particularly considering the implementation of this ambitious budget?
All right, the fact just means that we have global problem. in terms of
Inflation key.
economy. Inflation. If you look at our neighbors, they are doing higher inflation compared to what we are doing. If you look at UK, there is serious inflation problem. In fact,
Highest in more than 24 years.
America just increased their interest rates twice now. So that shows that 2023 is going to be a challenging year for all the country. Perhaps we are even looking at possible recession by next year. So what have we put in place as shock absorber to really meet up this? The main fear is that if the interest continues like this, that means we have to borrow beyond what we have borrowed now to service the debt. But Nigeria, in terms of the economy, we have been doing especially in agriculture, and that's why that's why my fear is in this current flood that is happening. You know, if you look at the inflation we have in Nigeria, it's food-driven inflation. Now we have more flood. What will be? So there must be a cushion effect to really make sure we mitigate this challenge of flooding to provide enough food for Nigerians come 2023.
Well, thank you so very much, Mr. Elias, for sharing your thoughts
My
with
pleasure.
us at this particular point in time. I assure you there will be more food for all of us to eat.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, let's now move on to the commodities market. And still talking commodities, oil prices were stable on Friday as support from a large cut to the OPEC plus supply targets and a weaker dollar were countered by global recession fears and weak oil demand in China. Reuters reports that Brent crude futures were down 31 cents to 0.3% at $94.26 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 25 cents to $88.86. Let's now join Nneka for updates on the global market.
Stocks in the Asia Pacific jumped on Friday, taking the lead from Wall Street overnight as investors shook off a strong inflation report. The Nikkei 225 in Japan jumped 3.25%, and the Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong was 1.21% higher, while the Shanghai Composite was up 1.84%. In Europe, markets also climbed as speculation abounded that the UK government may likely make a U-turn on its controversial fiscal policies. The DAX rose 0.62%, with the FTSE adding 0.79% and the French CAC advanced 0.84%. Conversely, U.S. stock futures ticked down in early deals as investors turned their attention to big bank earnings after the major averages staged a historic turnaround rally. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 100 points, S&P 500 dipped by 0.4%, and Nasdaq 100 fell 0.65%. African stocks closed slightly higher, taking a cue from Europe and Asia. South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 was up at 0.73%. Tunisia's Tune Index rose 0.43%. Namibia's overall index gained 0.1%, and Ghana's GSE Composite was marginally positive.
That wraps Business Express for today. Remember to keep in touch with us, so do send in your comments, observations, and suggestions. Also be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on our various social media platforms. Business Express returns next week, Monday.